right, we're in Psalms 116, and the first question is, what can we conclude about the author's life at the time this psalm was written? You can read through it and you'll see this concept, but it's most directly stated in verse 8. For you have delivered my soul from death, mine eyes from tears, and my feet from falling. So at the time of the writing of this, the psalmist has recently been delivered, particularly from mortal danger, from death, and many other things, as stated in other portions of the psalm. The second question, what single question is asked in this psalm? And that question is in verse 12. What shall I render unto the Lord for all his benefits toward me? I'll read it again. What shall I render unto the Lord for all his benefits toward me? And most particularly here, the psalmist is focusing on the deliverance that God has given him from death. But now he's talking about all of the benefits. When he looks back over his entire life, he sees benefit after benefit, blessing after blessing. And now that question comes to mind, what shall I render to the Lord for all of his benefits toward me? The next question, describe how this single question can impact how we do our daily devotions. That's just one place. Our daily devotions. Sometimes the reason we do our daily devotion, what gets us up out of bed in the morning, what pushes us to get up earlier, what pushes us to take that time in the night before we go down, or whenever it is that we've set aside time to have our daily personal time with God. Sometimes what's motivating us is that if I don't do this, I'm not going to strengthen my relationship with God, and so I won't be saved. I'm going to be eternally lost. Or if I don't do this, then God's not going to bless me for this day. If I don't do this, I might have a bad day. If I don't do this, God might take away some of the things that I have in my life. If I don't do this, something will be lost. Somehow I'll be punished. Somehow I won't be blessed. Somehow I won't get from God what I want. And sometimes that is what's motivating us. Those kinds of things are what are motivating us to have our daily devotions. But what if this question, what shall I render unto the Lord for all his benefits toward me? What if that's what we thought about when we woke up in the morning, thinking back over our life, thinking back recently, thinking back far in the past, all of the benefits that God has given to me? Is 30 minutes too much? Is 15 minutes too much to ask? Is an hour too much time to give to God? When I compare that 15, 30 minutes, that hour, to all of the benefits that God has given to me, is that too much for me to render to him? And this is what the psalmist is calling us to. What shall I render to the Lord for all he has done to me? What if we ask that question in response to difficult people, when people are getting on our nerves and they're frustrating us and they're not doing what we want them to do, or not doing what they're supposed to do, what they promised to do, what we expect them to do? What if we asked that question then and said, well, what if I treated this child of God the way God has treated me when I've been frustrated, when I haven't done what I've said I would do, when I haven't done what God expected me to do? What if we ask that question? What can I render to God in how I treat this difficult person? What about in our participation in ministries of our church? What sacrifice is too much to give of my time, of my abilities to support the work of my local church or support the ministries of this church? When I think of the benefits God has given to me, how about when we participate in church? Sometimes we don't feel like singing. Sometimes we don't feel like praying. Sometimes we don't feel like even attending worship service. Well, what shall I render to God when I think of all of his benefits to me? Can I not sing? Is it too much to ask to open my mouth and praise to God when I think of all the benefits that he has given to me? And finally, what about obeying those difficult commandments? Those commandments that cut to the heart, those commandments that are seemingly great sacrifices. I don't want to give that up. When God speaks to me personally, not just the 10 commandments, not just these external things, but talking about those things in our heart, the pride that God is asking me to give up, the desire to show myself, the desire to be first at my job, the desire to let others think highly of me when they shouldn't think so highly of me. These things, when God is calling me to give up these things, when God is calling me to sacrifice something, what shall I render unto the Lord for all his benefits to me? Finally, I just want to share this thought with you. When you look at the disciples of Jesus, primarily the motivating force in their following the Savior, in their following Jesus, the reason they forsook all and followed him was largely because they were hoping to sit next to him in his kingdom. They were hoping he was going to be the Messiah and they would be able to reign with him. They were looking forward. Their motivation was forward looking. They were looking to what was to come and what they hoped to receive. But when you look at particularly Mary Magdalene, her reason for following Jesus was looking back. She looked back at what he had done for her. If you remember in Luke 7, when Jesus tells the story to Simon the leper, he says, look at this woman, and what she has done for me. She wasn't doing these things hoping that Jesus will reward her. She was doing these things in gratitude because she had been forgiven. Like the parable that Jesus tells in that story, she had been forgiven all of her great multitudinous debt. And in gratitude for that, looking back, that was her motivation. Her motivation for following him was looking back, whereas the disciples' motivation was looking forward. And at the cross, those whose hope was disappointed because it was looking forward and now was not realized, they forsook him and fled. And Mary Magdalene, where was she? She was there. Where was she when he was in the tomb, preparing herself for Sunday morning, bright and early Sunday morning, before the sun rose? She got up and went to the tomb. Where were they? Cowering in fear, because their hope, their motivation was forward looking, and it was disappointed. But she could not be disappointed because her motivation for following Jesus was in the past. It was looking back on all those benefits that she had already received from him, namely in his forgiveness. And hopefully that will be our motivation as well. When we look back over our life, if we're honest, God has been good to us. If we're honest, despite the challenges we've had, despite the difficulties, despite the loss, God has been good to all of us. And when we look at those benefits, may that be our motivating factor. What shall we render unto the Lord for all his benefits?